Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, those are two receivers that you don't want to lose because both those guys could be considered number one receivers. So obviously this is going to be a huge test for CJ Stroud. But I think the other X factor is, what are we going to see from Joe Mixon? I could not believe some of the numbers that he's been putting up lately because from a betting standpoint, there have been multiple times where I bet on Joe Mixon and he averaged like 3.1 yards per carry or 2.7 yards per carry, where he burned me. And I said to myself, oh my God, he got the carries, but he just wasn't very efficient back when he was with the Bengals. But if you look at this year, he's averaging 4.9 yards per carry, and he's gone over the century mark in 4 of 5 games, posting some really, out there stats. 102 yards against the Colts, 115, 102, 159 are some of those numbers. And I understand on paper that the Jets are supposed to be one of the better defenses, but I feel like we still haven't seen it. So I do feel like if the Texans can establish the run and rely more heavily on Joe Mixon here, that they can keep this, within a touchdown or something. I do feel like the Texans still have a fighting chance when CJ Stroud is your quarterback and Joe Mixon is running the way that he is. And I'm still not completely sold that the Jets aren't going to shoot themselves in the foot.
I mean, they might. God, I'm going to hate myself for betting on this game. I'm going to bet on the Jets, man. But I'll tell you, I really don't like it a lot. I don't like it a bit. So I keep looking at the total as well. That should go over or under. I will say this, CJ Stroud, and I've said this before, but I think it's an important point, is that CJ Stroud, if you look at his home versus road splits, he averages when he throws the ball like 100 yards less on the road. He's a much more effective and efficient quarterback when he's throwing at home this season. I'm not sure quite exactly why that is, because they're more, like, I understand it's okay, yeah, it's the home crowd, you're more comfortable, sure, but these are much more dramatic than you normally see in the NFL. And also, as you were mentioning, the Texans are a much more run-heavy team than we have seen in years past, right, where they do lean on Joe Mixon. So you would anticipate that from what we saw last year, C.J. Stroud's going to be tossing the football around. They don't do that nearly as much. Part of that is a shift in the way that they operate their offense. Part of it is the injury bug. So it's a different Texans team, a still successful team, but a different one in the way that they manage that offense.
Yeah, so I think that I'm going to stay away from a side. I want to pull on the thread that you were talking about with the Jets and how it feels like the number is, from a gambling sense, it feels like the Jets are the play. Simply because they're the favorites. They're a team that's lost 5 straight. So something doesn't make sense. Betting on the NFL feels almost like a trust fall, where you kind of have to trust the trends. And sometimes it feels very uneasy and you don't know what you're doing. But from somebody who's bet on the NFL for quite some time, and you as well, doesn't it feel like sometimes you cannot ignore some of these signals that the lines are telling you?
Oh, yeah. You just have to... You have to take a step back and understand that sometimes Vegas is sending you a clear message. And that clear message right here is take the Texans. Take the Texans. That's the initial thought, right? And then I think people like you and me, people who have been gambling for a while, we know better than to fall into those traps. And listen, the Texans can win this game. It's still a tight line. But ultimately, when you see a line, we say this all the time, that doesn't make any sense, sometimes that's the exact play. When I saw the Jets were favored here, I'm like, the Jets are favored? Jets, Jets, bleh. The Jets are favored? Are you serious? And they are. So I had to dig deeper and say, well, why is this? And so it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come home, but I do think it's the right side. I kind of hate that this is where we are on Thursday Night Football, still just slogging through another Jets season. And I swear to God, if I see Fireman Ed tonight,
oh no,
I hope they cut him out completely. I'm over that guy. So I don't know. I just think the Jets they're getting by on star power, and I'm betting on the Jets, but I'm sick and tired of the Jets. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm over the Jets. I'm over Aaron Rodgers. I'm over all the excuses. I'm over them just placating him again and again and again, only for the Jets to suck. And I don't like betting on teams that suck, but I'm going to bet on the New York Jets tonight.
Well, here's the thing. Even if you don't want to bet on the Jets, you don't have to. I think for me, it's more of a signal to not bet on a side. Because if the line is telling me that, hey, the Jets are probably the play based on the line here, but the eye test says, okay, this is not a Jets team I can trust, it's not that I'm going to bet on the Jets. I'm just not going to bet on the Texans either. Is I'm not going to pick a side in this game. So it feels like you didn't have like a super strong feeling on a total here. I feel like we're going to see a lower scoring affair,
Mm-hmm.
especially with all the weapons out for the Texans. Obviously, we talked about how the run game's been really important for the Texans. The Jets offense still really hasn't taken off the ground too much either. For as many weapons as they have and what we expected from Aaron Rodgers, some of the offensive drives just haven't been very productive. So would you lean towards the under? Do you like the over? Like 42 feels it's low-ish, but it's not low enough to where I'm like looking down my nose and saying like, "Oh no." Something in the 30s maybe qualifies for that.
Yeah.
Do you like an under?
I would lean to the under. Yes. So my handicap for the under is this. Number one, the Texans' weapons are going to be out, right? So they are depleted when it comes to Stephon Diggs. They're depleted when it comes to Nico Collins. And we've talked about how they like to lean on the run game. If you're leaning on the run game, that means, of course, more time off the clock, more time of possession in theory. So that lends itself to an under. Also, the Texans have been an under team this season. They're 6-2 to the under. And then you look at the Jets. The Jets have scored less than 20 points in or more than 20 points only once in their last 5 games. So this is not a good offense. So I think the lack of playmakers right now for the Texans combined with the Jets offense that continues to sputter, and it's kind of a chilly night at the Meadowlands, I think we're probably looking at an under. I really just don't like this game. I'd rather just have a couple burgers right now, for being honest.
I
That's what I'd
forgot that
rather
you're
do.
the Hamburglar
That's
because
right.
I feel
I'm
like that
wrong.
saying could be, costume proof. If you just said this without a costume, I'm like, yeah, I could really go for a burger as well. I love
Mm-hmm.
cheeseburgers. But maybe you would steal them from me today with that costume on. As far as props go, I do think maybe there's some value in taking some type of a receiving prop for the Texans. Because here's the thing, from a logic based standpoint, if your top two options go down, somebody's going to have to eat up those targets because
Mm-hmm.
we've seen Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins get a lion's share of the target. So, like, somebody's going to have to fill in. The question is, who is it going to be? So, here are your options. Tank Dell has the highest number set, I believe, of the receivers. 56.5 is the number. Dalton Schultz, the tight end, set at 42.5. Or you could rely on the run game. And Joe Mixon to reel in some catches and go over his reception prop. You look at the receiving yards, it's 24.5. I always feel like that's a solid play on short weeks. I love my running back receiving props. So maybe that's where I'm leaning.